This video is brought to you by Keeps. Hey Wisecrack, Jared here, coming from the self-isolating comforts of my own apartment. And let me tell you, I got a bad feeling about this. No, I'm not just talking about my dwindling supplies of top ramen and coffee, but, well, this.
I have a bad feeling about this.
I got a bad feeling about this.
I got a bad feeling about this.
I've got a bad feeling about it.
Quiet.
Yes, the time has finally come to delve into the least controversial subject on the internet. A little yarn called Star Wars. When The Rise of Skywalker was set for release, director J.J. Abrams promised this final entry in the saga would tie up everything that had come before. Per the filmmaker, this wasn't just the end of a single movie or even a trilogy. It was the end of an entire 9-film saga. It had to be the end of not just 3 movies, but 9 movies. The question, of course, could The Rise of Skywalker possibly tie up every loose end and story thread in a satisfying way? I mean, this is a gargantuan, seemingly impossible task, and yet, somehow, they did it. After the film's release, The Rise of Skywalker was lauded as the best Star Wars film of all time, and the internet came together in universal celebration. Oh, wait. Sorry, I was imagining an alternate timeline where going out to the grocery store isn't an episode of Black Mirror. No, The Rise of Skywalker was, of course, a colossal disappointment, filled with awkward exposition, plot holes, and strange retconning of its predecessors. So, what the hell happened? How did The Rise of Skywalker fail so absolutely? Well, the answer lies in the past. You know, that thing the last film kinda sorta tried to kill?
Let the past die. Kill it, if you have to.
So welcome to this Wisecrack Edition on The Rise of Skywalker. What went wrong? And of course, spoilers ahead for the whole Skywalker saga. But before we get into it, I want to give a shout out to this week's sponsor, Keeps. It can be hard to admit that you're losing your hair, especially when, in my case, it's pretty intertwined with my identity. It's tough to talk about, but ignoring it won't solve the problem. With hair loss, prevention is key. 2 out of 3 guys will experience some form of male pattern baldness by the time they're 35, and although I'm praying I'm the 1 out of 3, it's best to be sure. Keeps is an affordable hair loss treatment plan that brings FDA-approved prescription and over-the-counter medication right to your door. Their treatments can combat hair loss so you keep the hair on your head. With Keeps, some men even experience hair regrowth. You can meet with a Keeps doctor right from the comfort of your own home. From there, you can order your treatments and keep track of your progress. Find out why Keeps has more 5-star reviews than any of its competitors and why nearly 100,000 men trust Keeps for their hair loss prevention medication by clicking the link in the description or by going to keeps.com/wisecrack. If you use our link, you can get 50% off your first order, so stop stressing about your hair. And now, back to the show. Alright, let's get into a quick recap. The Rise of Skywalker begins with the Resistance intercepting a message that Palpatine is somehow not only alive and well, but amassing a fleet of ships on the hidden planet Exegol. Our heroes, Rey, Finn, and Poe, go in search of a wayfinder that will lead to the mysterious planet. Meanwhile, Kylo Ren, at the behest of Palpatine, is tasked with killing Rey and ending the Jedi once and for all. From there, you get your typical lightsaber duels, chases, rescue missions, and cameos by beloved characters. There's even some new character revelations and backstories. Kylo basically tells Rey not to pay attention to anything that happened in The Last Jedi.
They're filthy junk traders who sold you off for drinking money. The dead in a pauper's grave in the Jakku Desert.
Instead, turns out Rey isn't a nobody, but actually...
You don't just have power. You have his power. You're his granddaughter.
This is followed by some more lightsaber duels, chases, and rescue missions interspersed with a classic character heroically sacrificing themselves. The film culminates in an aerial battle between the Resistance and the First Order, while Rey faces off against Palpatine with the help of bad guy gone light Kylo Ren. Rey kills Palpatine, but in doing so, dies. Of course, 10 seconds later, Kylo brings her back to life, sacrificing himself in the process. We end with Rey taking up the mantle of the Skywalkers.
Who are you?
I'm Rey.
Rey who?
Rey Skywalker.
If all this sounds very familiar, like you've seen this same story play out before, well, that's because you have. Oddly enough, George Lucas spells it out in a behind-the-scenes featurette on the making of The Phantom Menace. Lucas explains how Anakin is directly modeled after Luke Skywalker.
You see the echo of where it all is going to go. And instead of destroying the Death Star, he destroys the ship that controls the robots. Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme.
For Lucas, the story of Star Wars was all about how history is constantly repeating itself. There are hundreds of echoes in the prequels directly correlating to the original trilogy. A young Anakin blows up the control ship just as Luke will blow up the Death Star. Both guys lose a hand in a lightsaber duel. Obi-Wan watches helplessly as his mentor Qui-Gon Jinn is killed by Darth Maul, mirroring Obi-Wan's own eventual demise with Luke helplessly watching from the sidelines. And it isn't just these plot elements that bridge the two series together. Even the visual language of the prequels directly mirrors the original trilogy. To quote another sci-fi epic,
"All this has happened before, and all of it will happen again."
There's one person who took Lucas's approach to heart, J.J. Abrams. In an interview for The Force Awakens, Abrams stressed the importance of repetition. Part of the story of this movie is history repeats itself. But Abrams took Lucas's approach one step further, getting super meta. To the filmmaker, it wasn't just history that was repeating, but the actual films themselves. I wanted to tell a story that was not just history repeating itself, but a story that embraced the movies that we know as the actual history of this galaxy. This was not about a nostalgia play. It felt to me like a way of saying, let's go back to a Star Wars that we know so we can tell another story. For Abrams, the fact that The Force Awakens is pretty much a carbon copy of A New Hope is in and of itself the point. For a pop culture savant like Abrams, it's not enough to merely echo the events that came before. Instead, he has to repeat them and copy the previous trilogy wholesale. Thus, Rey's a stand-in for Luke, Kylo for Darth Vader, Poe for Han Solo, even the basic story is the same. A group of rebels fight against a nefarious imperialist army. Hell, there's even a droid with an important message that can turn the tides of the war. Now, Lucas and Abrams aren't the first people to claim that history has a tendency to repeat itself. This notion dates all the way back to the dialectic bad boy himself, Georg Wilhelm Hegel. In Hegel's lectures on the philosophy of history, the philosopher famously stated that revolutionary acts always tend to occur twice. Per Hegel, in all periods of the world, a political revolution is sanctioned in men's opinions when it repeats itself. By repetition, that which at first appeared merely a matter of chance and contingency becomes a real and ratified existence. As proof, Hegel cited the formation of the Roman Empire. See, Caesar first led a revolution to take over Rome and the Republic and become its de facto emperor. Many objected to Caesar's reign, though, leading to a second revolution, in which he was assassinated. But in the aftermath, this second revolution only reinforced the idea that one single emperor was needed to rule, in effect cementing Caesar's initial revolution to destroy the Republic. In a nutshell, the revolution has to happen a second time to make the first one work. The latest trilogy of Star Wars films adopts this same philosophy. In the original trilogy, the rebels defeat Emperor Palpatine and the Empire. But this revolution is short-lived. In the ashes of the Empire's defeat, the First Order rises to power, thereby prompting a second revolution. In the Rise of Skywalker, Rey, Finn, and Poe lead this second rebellion to victory, finally cementing the rebels' victory that came before. It's pretty much exactly as Hegel himself described, the revolution repeating twice in order to fully take effect. Yet, in channeling the spirit of Hegel, Abrams has fallen into a kind of historical trap set forth as an addendum to Hegel's philosophy. In 1852, philosopher Karl Marx stated that history doesn't quite repeat itself, instead it parodies itself. As he writes, Hegel stated that all great world historic facts and personages appear, so to speak, twice. He forgot to add, the first time as tragedy, the second time as farce. For Marx, when a revolution repeats itself, it's not the cement that reinforces the original, but is instead a mockery of what came before. Marx most famously applied this criticism to Louis Bonaparte, the nephew of Napoleon, who, much like his uncle, led a rebellion to seize France and become emperor. Louis even led his coup on the anniversary of his uncle's coronation as the Emperor of France. Yet for Marx, Louis was nothing but a caricature of the old Napoleon, dressing up like his famous uncle, repeating his same populist rhetoric, but betraying Napoleon's own principles. For Marx, little Louis duplicates the cult of Napoleon in order to legitimize himself, but without the values of his uncle, he became nothing more than a hollow parody. History had repeated, but merely as a farce of the original. Just like Napoleon 2.0 dressed up as his legendary uncle without understanding what made him a competent leader, Rise of Skywalker dresses itself in the nostalgia of Star Wars without understanding what made the original trilogy great. Instead of crafting a new mythos, the film borrows from what's come before, using the exact same plot points, archetypes, and even sets. But the end result becomes nothing more than a parody of its predecessors. For example, consider how the Rise of Skywalker treats Rey's flirtations with the dark side. This is the same arc as Luke's in Return of the Jedi, but in that film, Luke truly did grapple with joining his father, at one point even succumbing to his darker impulses. Yet, in The Rise of Skywalker, this arc is never fully dramatized. Rey has a dark vision, does a little Force lightning, and that's pretty much it. Palpatine tries to tempt Rey into succumbing to her darker impulses just as he tempted Luke, but Rey barely flinches from her morals. It's all talk. The arc exists simply for the sake of repetition. It's just as Mark said, history repeats itself, first as a tragedy, and then, well, as this. Even the Rise of Skywalker's twists are lifted from the original trilogy. The Rey Palpatine granddaughter reveal is basically just a watered down, "I am your father." But the Palpatine reveal lacks any of the dramatic weight of its predecessor. In the original trilogy, Luke believed his father was a Jedi hero who was betrayed and murdered by Darth Vader.
A young Jedi named Darth Vader, who was a pupil of mine until he turned to evil, helped the Empire hunt down and destroy the Jedi Knights. He betrayed and murdered your father.
Thus, when the big Vader turn happens, it shatters everything Luke believed to be true. It undermined the foundation of his moral compass. His father wasn't a hero, but the villain who betrayed the Jedi and killed his surrogate father. Now let's look at Rey. Rey thinks her parents were junk traders who abandoned her. So the reveal that Palpatine is her grandfather doesn't hold the same emotional weight. It's not like she wanted to be a great Jedi to emulate her dead parents. Also, Rey hasn't even met Palpatine yet and knows nothing about him other than he's a bad guy. And once she finds out Palpatine is her grandfather, not much changes. He's still just a guy that needs to be defeated. Her world hasn't been shattered in the same way that Luke's was. If anything, the Palpatine twist is more of a revelation for fans as they recount all the great prequel memes they've seen. Rise of Skywalker is filled with these moments. Like Louis dressing up like his uncle, the film incessantly dresses itself up like the originals, repeating word for word, shot per shot what happened in them, but without any of the context that made these moments work. These moments only exist as hollow callbacks. Any emotional or dramatic heft is entirely dependent on the viewer's relationship to the original trilogy. Just look at how Rise of Skywalker butchers Han Solo's most famous line.
Dad. I know.
This, of course, harkens back to one of the most famous moments in Empire Strikes Back.
I love you.
I know.
That simple exchange was the culmination of Han and Leia's tumultuous will they or won't they romantic relationship. The reason the line has become a touchstone for the characters and the series as a whole is because of the build-up beforehand. The original films put in the work with their relationship to make this single line iconic. But in The Rise of Skywalker, the line's just reused as a reference for fans. It doesn't have any narrative value in the film except as a way to remind viewers of a movie they feel nostalgic for. Rise of Skywalker is built on references, but it doesn't take into account the hundreds of moments beforehand that made these iconic moments work. The relationships, the characters, the world building that were the foundation to the original series' success. And without this footing, these references are just that, hollow and empty. A farce of the original trilogy. Rise of Skywalker becomes so obsessed with harkening back that it even sacrifices logic and its own characters' motivations at the behest of these callbacks. For one, how the heck is Palpatine even alive? Why bring him back as the villain in the first place? Well, let's take it from J.J. Abrams.
The more we talked about it, the more inevitable it felt that this character who was so important in the first two trilogies come back and in some form.
That's the truth in a nutshell. Palpatine is the villain only because he's the villain from the first 6 films. Does it make any sense that the Emperor has somehow survived being thrown down a reactor shaft and blown to smithereens in Return of the Jedi? Rise of Skywalker doesn't care.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
Without any clear, logical reason for Palpatine's return, the character feels like a farce of who he once was. Even Palpatine's motivations now don't make a lick of sense. He sends Kylo to kill Rey, yet when Rey shows up and confronts him at the end of the film, Palpatine changes his tune completely.
I never wanted you dead. I wanted you here.
This, yet again, is a direct callback to the original trilogy where Palpatine tried to convert Luke to the dark side.
I'm looking forward to completing your training. In time, you will call me Master.
Thus, the only reason why Palpatine's motivation in Rise of Skywalker changes is to mirror his motivation in Return of the Jedi. And Rise of Skywalker is littered with these inconsistencies. How does Palpatine suddenly amass a fleet of ships, all equipped with planet-destroying weapons? Doesn't really matter, because Rise of Skywalker has to end with an aerial space battle, just like Return of the Jedi. The Rise of Skywalker attempts to elevate itself to the heights of the original films by playing on their success, structure, and nostalgia. But instead, the film becomes nothing more than a sad copy of a copy. It's so obsessed with harkening backwards that it never creates an identity of its own. History has now become Star Wars' own undoing. But what do you guys think? Are we being too hard on the 9th Star Wars film, or is it really just a bargain bin version of the Return of the Jedi? Let us know what you think in the comments below. Please don't yell at us. And a big thanks to all our patrons for supporting our podcast and the channel. Execute Order 66 on that subscribe button, and as always, thanks for watching, guys. Peace.